This is our fifth unit, and in this unit we're going to be looking at reading research articles. First, we'll look about the types of research articles, then the contribution of a research article and where to find it, then the macro structure, and the particular parts of a research article. Now again, why is this important to you? Well, you're going to need to read a lot of research articles in the course of doing your work, whether for iGEM or for some other project. And different types of articles have a different structure. So in order to read them effectively, you need to know that structure. The contribution is important because that tells you whether you want to read that article or not, what you're going to get out of it. And then the particular structure, the macro structure, which is the overall structure of the sections, and the particular things that you find within it are important for helping you read that article effectively. You had an example of why it's important to understand the structure of something in order to know what it does.
Yes, for example, the other day I received a souvenir like this. It has a certain structure, and I received this from a workshop that I presented. So from a university setting, a souvenir like this has almost no direction for me to guess.
Yeah, it looked, when I first saw it, I thought maybe it was like coasters for glasses or something. But then it's too heavy for that.
So after we open it, oh, voila.
There's a piece of paper there, but only one or two. That doesn't make much sense.
Then, if we look at the rest, oh, these are all
So originally,
paper.
probably this was all connected as one stack and intended to just sort of sit there and then you pull off one notepad at a time. But because it was disconnected and because you couldn't see the whole structure at the beginning, it was hard to guess what the purpose of it was.
This is very much like reading a research article. If you don't know what this is all about, you don't know where to look for things and what's the function, what's the purpose of this souvenir. If you only look at this section, you will guess it wrong. Look at this, you might guess this is a sticky pad, but then you see the rest and this, all of a sudden you find out how to look for things, and you need to have certain schema. That's the same as reading research article.
So now we'll look at different types of research articles. Primary research articles, secondary research, conference papers, letters, and review articles, and just basically how they're different.
The so-called primary research, it's basically you as the author, you design the whole research from the very beginning to the research method, to collecting all the data, to do whatever experiment or quantitative, qualitative analysis, and then analyze the results and do the discussion. This is primary. What is secondary?
Secondary has to do with other people having collected the data and then you use that data. This is more common in social science.
Yes, it's very much like the literature review in social science. So you look for all kinds of previous literature to summarize what other people have done so you can identify a research gap for your own primary research.
But it's also used in times where you have big data, where you can't collect all the data yourself. For instance, if you're dealing with a power grid or with environmental issues, there's too much data. It's too broad an area. You can't possibly collect it yourself. Or something like epidemiology, the spread of disease, where you can't do an experiment because it's ethically impossible to do an experiment with disease spread. So you need to collect data from a broad range of other studies and then combine that, that's then called secondary research.
But do not be fooled by the name primary versus secondary. We might think primary is the best, the only research. But secondary, it's secondary. Then you're wrong.
And then you have conference papers. Conference papers are different from research papers because they have limited review. Usually the review is limited to, is it suitable for this conference? There's no revision usually, it's just the author's contribution. And so it's not treated as seriously as a journal article that's been reviewed by at least 2 blind reviewers. So particularly in social science, it's very rarely cited in other publications. You wait until it's published completely. However, in engineering, in medicine, case studies, things like this, that may be the only publication of that data. And therefore, in those fields and for those types of studies, conference papers are much more commonly cited in other literature. Now, it's fairly easy to recognize conference papers if you look at the reference, because the reference usually will have something like conference or symposium or workshop, or it may say proceedings. Proceedings is a printed booklet of all the papers from that conference. On the other hand, letters and brief reports and correspondence are another genre that's common in engineering, not in social science at all.
Yes, the name letters. What is it?
Letters in social science often indicates letters to the editor. And those are opinion pieces or comments on some previous article. But letters in engineering means short publications that are very brief and rapidly published in order to claim primacy before somebody else publishes something on the same topic. And so again, they have limited review, and we'll find later they have a shorter structure than other articles, but they again are frequently cited.
This is very different from social science.
True.
We are not competing who is the first to find a certain solution or design a certain product. We need time to finally realize, understand something, and write it up as solid research.
But in engineering and in things like nanotechnology, sometimes there's a whole journal that's called like nano letters. The whole journal is rapid publications. That's the whole purpose of it. In other cases, there are sections of a journal that are designed for letters as opposed to regular papers. And so it can be hard to recognize these if you just look at the PDF file, because sometimes it says it, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there'll be up in the title line something that says letters, but sometimes not. Sometimes you need to look at the table of contents of the journal, and you'll see that there's sections for regular papers versus, in this case, communications in the IEEE transactions on antennas and propagation. It's another name for the same type of article. And you may find a difference in the format. Again, for instance, in this journal, the regular papers have a title all the way across the page, whereas the letters, it's only across half the page. They continue directly from the previous letter or correspondence. And each journal has their own format, so you need to recognize format in different journals. But sometimes in the abstract as well, it will say in this letter or in this communication. So it will indicate what type of article it is in that abstract as well. This is similar in survey articles. Survey articles usually will say in this review. And they review previous work. This is different from primary or secondary research because they don't do any new work of their own. They simply review what's been done, evaluate, compare, and it's actually a very good place to begin reading about a field because it covers a lot of the material and it's much faster to read a review article than to read all 20 or 30 or 100 of those articles that it talks about in that review article.
Again, the word survey is also used differently in engineering as opposed to in social science. When we conduct a survey, this is firsthand collecting of data from questionnaire or so on. And sometimes it's a rapid and anonymous survey by quickly write down some observation.
So I prefer to use the term review article, even though sometimes the authors will call it a survey. But again, in many cases, this will be indicated on the PDF, either in the heading line or above the title with something that says review article, but it may not be. There are many other kinds of papers as well. There are theoretical papers, methodological papers, opinion pieces, case studies, action research, many different types of things. All of them have a slightly different structure. Most of these are less common and less relevant for iGEM than the ones we're going to talk about. But recognize that there are many, many other formats than those that we're going to talk about.
But case studies and action research are very commonly done in social science, especially in education.
Right. So again, we'll talk in the next few videos about the structure in more detail and how to read these different types of articles effectively.